So, what if I told you there's a new policy out of the EU that could completely shake up how the world trades things like steel, cement, even fertilizer? It's called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM for short. And honestly, it's one of the boldest climate rules we've ever seen. So, in this explainer, we're going to break down what it is, how it actually works, and why this is a really big deal for everyone, not just folks in Europe. Okay, so to really get why this policy even exists, you have to start with a pretty simple question. Imagine you're trying to keep your yard clean, right? But your neighbor just keeps tossing their garbage over the fence. I mean, what do? Well, in the world of climate policy, that's exactly the problem the EU is trying to fix. And believe it or not, that problem has a name. It's called carbon leakage. Here's how it works. A country, let's say in the EU, gets really serious about cutting its pollution. That's great, but it often makes it more expensive for heavy industries to operate. So what do some of those companies do? They just pack up and move their factories to countries with weaker environmental laws. And the result? Well, the EU's carbon footprint looks smaller on paper, but the world's total pollution hasn't changed. In fact, it might have just gotten worse. So let's talk about why this is such a huge headache for the European Union. We're going to dig into the real dilemma they're up against. Okay, so the EU has set some seriously ambitious climate goals. We're talking a 55% cut in emissions by 2030 and hitting total climate neutrality by 2050. And these aren't just suggestions, they're legally binding. They're forcing a massive shift in the EU's economy. But here's the catch, the paradox, really. The more ambitious the EU gets, the bigger the temptation for companies to just leave. The risk of carbon leakage actually goes up. And this isn't just some abstract fear, you know? The EU's own documents basically say it out loud. This quote here really gets to the heart of it. As their climate goals get bigger, the risk of carbon linkage threatens to unravel the whole thing. It really makes you ask, what's the point of making your own industries cleaner if you just end up importing the same pollution from somewhere else? Which naturally brings us to the EU's big idea for a solution. They figured, hey, if the problem is happening at the border, then the solution has to be at the border too. And that solution is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. So what is it? Put simply, it's a tool that puts a price on the carbon pollution that was created when making certain products outside the EU that are then imported into the EU. Yeah, you can think of it as basically a carbon tariff. So what's the game plan here? What's CBAM really trying to do? Well, it boils down to 4 main goals. First and foremost, stop that carbon leakage we talked about. Second, make sure the price of imported stuff actually reflects how much carbon was emitted to make it. Third, and this is a big one, it's meant to push industries all over the world to get cleaner. And finally, it's about leveling the playing field for companies inside the EU who are already paying for their pollution. Okay, theory is one thing, but how does this all work in the real world? Let's look at how it's being rolled out right now. So this isn't all happening at once. CBAM is being rolled out in phases. We're actually in the first phase right now. It kicked off in October 2023. This is what they call the transitional period, and it's all about reporting and gathering data. No one's paying any tariffs yet. The policy gets its real teeth in January 2026. That's when importers will have to start buying and handing over these things called CBAM certificates to cover the pollution in the products they're bringing in. So for right now, during this get-ready phase, it's all about collecting information. It's a pretty straightforward 3-step process. Step 1, the company making the product outside the EU has to figure out the emissions that went into making it. Step 2, they send that data over to their customer, the company in the EU that's importing it. And finally, step 3, the EU importer takes all that data and files a quarterly report. Simple as that, for now. Now, this probably makes you wonder, what exactly are they counting? What is this embedded carbon they keep talking about? Let's break that down. Basically, CBAM is looking at 2 main kinds of emissions. You've got your direct emissions, or Scope 1. Think of this as the pollution coming right from the factory itself, like from its smokestacks. Then you have the indirect emissions, or Scope 2. This is the carbon footprint of the electricity the factory buys to run its machines. Both of these have to be added up and reported. It's important to know, this rule doesn't apply to every single product coming into the EU. Not yet, anyway. For now, CBAM is laser-focused on a handful of key sectors. These are industries that are 1, very carbon-intensive, and 2, at a high risk of that carbon leakage we talked about. So we're talking about the absolute building blocks of our economy, things like iron and steel, cement, aluminum, fertilizers, and even electricity.
So you can see how even though this is an EU policy, its effects are meant to ripple out across the entire globe. Let's zoom out and look at that global impact.
The long-term strategy here really has two parts. On one hand, it's about fairness at home. It's designed to make sure EU companies who are already paying for their carbon pollution aren't getting crushed by foreign competitors who aren't. But on the other hand, it's a huge signal to the rest of the world. It basically says, if you want to sell your products in our massive market, you need to start cleaning up your production. And to really grasp the logic, you have to know about something called the EU's Emissions Trading System, or ETS. For years, this system has put a price on carbon for industries inside the EU. So you can think of CBAM as the other side of that coin. It's the external piece that puts a similar price on carbon for goods coming into the EU. Together, they create one consistent climate policy, both inside and out. And all of this leaves us with a massive question, doesn't it? Is this the future of climate policy? Is CBAM the blueprint that other countries are going to start copying to fight climate change? Or is this the first shot in a whole new kind of trade war, a battle fought over carbon and accusations of green protectionism? The answer to that is going to shape more than just climate policy. It could reshape globalization as we know it. For sure, the next few years are going to be fascinating to watch.